Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Bill Braswell, Polk County Commissioner for District 3. The pandemic has been front and center on our minds for almost a year. It happened quick and has had very lethal results. We've heard conflicting recommendations on how to deal with it, but there's always been one constant. The only way to stop it from being a threat was when a vaccine becomes available. Less than 30 days ago, 2 vaccines were approved by the FDA to defeat COVID-19. Today we're going to talk about the facts and data involved in creating, approving, and managing these vaccines. I've asked 2 experts in the field of biotech and immunology to join me today to talk about the vaccine and clear up some of the misinformation. Dr. Kevin Folta is a professor at the University of Florida that studies molecular biology of disruptive chemistry. His laboratory has pioneered a new approach to discover new compounds that break intermolecular interaction from random DNA information. He also serves as a strategic communications consultant, teaching scientists, farmers, and ag industries how to engage the public about technology and food production. He has a Ph.D. in molecular biology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dr. Asha Brunings is a professor of microbiology and teaches microbiology for general education and for students who want to pursue careers in health-related fields. She has a Ph.D. in pathology from the University of Florida. Welcome to Polk County. Since our time is limited and attention spans are even shorter, let's get right to it. Dr. Folta, can you explain in terms even I can understand how we got a vaccine in less than a year?
Well, it's actually a pretty interesting process. And the main idea has been that that the process was simply shortened. And would you like me to dive into the presentation, or should we answer some of those questions up front?
Go ahead and let's do the presentation first.
All right, we'll roll into that then.
Yeah.
So let me share a screen here. No, it's an excellent question, and because it seems a much more compressed time scale than we would normally be comfortable with, but it's a very good thing that we were able to do this. So we'll talk about that today. So here should be seeing our screen there. How's that coming up? Does that look good?
Yeah, I got it.
So, very good, thank you. And that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Commissioner Braswell, for inviting us to do this.
You bet.
The reason that Dr. Brunings and I are interested in this is because like everybody else, we've seen the numbers, we've seen personally family members and friends and people in our communities affected by this pandemic, if not directly from health reasons, by financial reasons because of closures or other types of problems associated with it. We desperately want this to end. And with that in mind, we see the vaccine as being a critical part of reaching that end. This is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
The funny part is that the barrier now isn't a technical one. The problem isn't creating a vaccine, it's getting it into people.
Right, right.
So that's where we will that's what we'll talk about today, because if we have more information about how it works, and mostly deputizing the listener. So everybody who's following this and listening, we need you to be the communicator. Okay, we're here to train the trainers. We want you to take this information to your family and friends, and into your communities, your churches, your groups. Share this information, direct them to us to answer their questions. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So here we go. So just to start off, neither of us have any. These are for Asha and for myself. We're just here as private citizens, not as agents of our institutions, not as a University of Florida or other institutions. I have a small investment in Pfizer that I made back in 2010 that hasn't really changed much. So I'm not here on their behalf. We're not physicians offering medical advice. We're people who are experts in molecular biology. And Asha has an outstanding background in immunology, and she will be happy to answer your questions in that area. And that I already mentioned why we're here. We understand the idea that vaccines do not stop illness. Vaccinations stop illness. And so unless we can get those technologies deployed, we still will continue to see its effects. So what we really want you to do is help the scientific community, the medical community, become part of the movement to help bring those vaccinations to the patients or to the general population so that we can curb this pandemic. And this is what's really important, is who do we engage? And this slide here shows the change in attitude towards the vaccine from September 2020 to December 2020. And what you see here that's really important is the shift to definitely will get it. You see people more willing to take part in this. And it's because the numbers have gone up so quickly and the deaths are going up, hospitals are filling. We do sense more urgency amongst the general population. However, there's still a lot of folks who are completely against it. I don't know that we're going to have a good time reaching them, even with more information. Who we have to focus on are the folks in the middle. The folks who are saying, I probably will, probably won't. These are the folks who are showing vaccine hesitancy. And here we actually can create the change. We can move the needle with these folks. And these are the folks who we want you to try to reach. And we're here to show you the information that will help you be more effective in doing that. When we look at the group of people who are most vaccine hesitant, you can just, I won't go into the slide in detail, but you can see who's going to need a little more work and who are the folks who you may have more success in reaching first. There are other reasons that folks have for being disinterested in the vaccine or hesitant to receive the vaccine. But the main ones that you can really focus on are especially thinking of people of advanced age, folks over 50, like me, who do share some hesitancy, but seem to be more willing to accept the vaccine. I can't wait to get it. Than other parts of the population, because they are an at-risk group. So think about this slide and some of the folks who you can reach more effectively. This is important because there are things we can control and there are things we cannot control. And this slide says, when you're looking at the people who will absolutely not get the vaccine or are unlikely to be vaccinated, you can learn about who they are and what their rationale is for not being interested in the vaccination. And some of these things, you can say, don't trust vaccines, worry that they might get COVID from the vaccine. You can break down this chart into things we can control and things we can't. And so with the information we're giving you today, you can discuss with those folks about side effects, about the process of approval, about the potential to get the virus from the vaccine itself. These are things that we will discuss here today. And I think if you can understand these concepts, get them very clear, and then go forth and share those with the communities you interact with, this will go a long way towards slowing the spread of the pandemic, especially in your county.
Yeah, and like we talked about before, the whole reason I wanted you to do this, because I understood from your podcast when you broke down these groups of who were going to get it and who weren't going to get it. And there was that big group in the middle that, well, we don't know, is it safe, is it not safe? The whole point is just to educate people, just to get them spooled up on this thing so they understand it a little bit better, their comfort level gets a little bit better. And like you said, with this thing raging across the country right now, obviously more have shifted to the definitely will, but there's still a large group that they're scared of it. And I think we can do something to alleviate some of that fear here today.
Oh, very well put. And the slide that I have up now really illustrates that. This goes back to the original smallpox vaccination from Jenner. And back when this was being done, the fear of the vaccine, of the treatment, was running rampant. And while the disease was killing many people, the focus was on kind of manufactured risk, more so than actual risk. And that's something we're seeing here in this pandemic, is a lot of manufactured risk, a lot of disinformation, and that's really just blowing this out of control. So your job as a listener here is to become an agent of good information to help allay that. And that's what we hope to help with today. The basic idea of a vaccine is to introduce your body to something foreign that it mistakes for a pathogen. So this way you're tricking your body into thinking the pathogen is there. So that way, when the real pathogen comes along, it's already ready to fight. Okay, that's a very basic way to put it. A vaccine does nothing more than say, here I am, I'm the problem, and but you're not really the problem. And the body's response to that is the immune response. So there's a number of ways that that's been done in the past. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Basically, we'll talk about how vaccines are currently made, because when you understand that, you understand how this new vaccine was made so quickly. We'll talk about the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, or the structure of the virus. So SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. COVID-19 is the pandemic, the disease, the symptom spectrum. That's something a little different. We'll talk about what this mRNA vaccine is. Okay, we won't get into too much detail, but enough technical detail so you can be an expert on this. So what is an mRNA vaccine? What does that mean? Dr. Brunings will discuss the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine trials and the questions about safety and efficacy. And finally, we'll take your questions as you submit them through the Facebook page. The problem with traditional vaccines is that they're raised in chicken eggs or in tissue culture. And what that means is you introduce a small amount of the virus grows, it divides, and then it's harvested. And then it's usually killed or weakened. And then that's used to present the body with what the virus looks like. Here's what the body needs to be looking out for. Okay, they get an injection of that dead or attenuated virus, the weakened virus, that now the body says, okay, this is what I have to get ready for. And so that's the way traditional vaccines were made. There's other ways too, but this is the main way in which it was done. And I will contrast this against the way the SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19 vaccine is made. Now this is what that virus looks like. Okay, it looks like a little ball with spikes, and that little spike is called a spike glycoprotein. That little spike is the part that shakes hands with your cell. It shakes hands with a specific receptor on your cell, and that's the way. The first step in how it gets into the cell is that connection between what's called the spike protein and your cells, the receptors on your cells in your lungs or in your mucous membranes. So it's important to understand the structure so you can understand how the vaccine works. The way that this is working, and we won't go into this in too much detail on this particular talk, but the basic idea is that the virus can't do anything on its own. It can't reproduce on its own. It needs your cells to replicate. So it has to shake hands with your cell, be welcomed into your cell, and then once inside, it kind of hijacks the hardware of the cell to make more of itself. And so if you can break any part of that chain, break it from recognizing the cell or from coming into the cell, then you've solved the problem. The virus can't reproduce. And there's been a couple of ways that we've been able to, that scientists have been able to generate different ways of breaking that. And the vaccine is one of them. Okay, the mRNA vaccine is one of them. The mRNA vaccines are directed against what's called the spike protein, so that little protrusion on the cell. And they teach the body that when your immune system sees that structure, that is what it is to attack. That's what it is there to shut down. And so the virus has the spike protein. The vaccine teaches the body that structure is what is attached to the virus that needs to be removed. Okay, that's a real, and I won't go into the details of that particular slide, but this shows that in a cartoon that a virus binds what's called an ACE2 receptor. It's a specific structure on your cells that does something else that the virus has learned to exploit. It binds onto it like a lock and key. And when that connection is made, the cell welcomes that virus into the cell. It's kind of a way of the virus sneaking into the cell by first saying, hey, I'm here, I'm not an enemy, and then coming inside where it will reproduce. So that's the basic idea. It's that if we can break that first connection, then you can stop the entry of the virus into the cell and stop viral replication. And there's been a couple of ways to do that. And I won't go into the details here, but what this basically shows is that red part on the slide, that red little cluster, is representative of the receptor on the cell, so the docking point. The blue thing is the virus spike protein. And so if there's this connection that's made, that's the first step in viral replication, is getting it into the cell. And so scientists have come up with a number of different ways, my lab included, we're working on this, of different ways that you can generate disruptive molecules, molecules that bind to block that connection. And that's how the first wave of the vaccine will work. Okay, the first step of that vaccine, and shown on the next slide here. Oh, this is a slide that actually Dr. Brunings put in before. But the basic idea that there's, why don't you run through this one, Asha? Just, you're a little better at this one than I am.
Right. So when you are first exposed to any kind of pathogen, so when you're infected with a virus, there are two parts of your body's immune response that protect you against that. And you can think of your immune response as like the guard of your body. That protects you against foreign invaders. And so the innate immune response is going to be the same no matter what kind of invader enters your body. And it's mainly geared towards trying to sort of gobble up those diseases before they can cause major harm. And when that fails, then we need a more sophisticated response, when we need specialized guards that only can neutralize these specific invaders. So what you see in this little GIF here is a picture of a cell that is gobbling up a pathogen. And that is necessary because that is going to then activate that other part that you really need. And so when you think of the vaccine, the way to think about that is that you have this guard system that protects your house, right? And so the vaccine comes in and teaches you what the enemy looks like, so that now later on when the real enemy comes in, you are prepared and you know exactly how to block that enemy from entering your body and causing disease. And that is basically what we're trying to do. So we're using the vaccination to teach the guards how to protect.
Very well put. Perfect. And so here's how that's going to, here's one of the ways in which another way in which this will work is actually physically blocking that virus from entering the cell. And this just shows on the again, a model of what your receptor looks like in your cell, that structure there. And then on the other side, this little purple and green thing is the antibody that's produced. So an antibody is a molecule that's produced by your body in response to that threat. And in this case, that antibody is binding to that spike protein, is binding and covering it up and physically getting in the way of that connection. And that's one of the ways in which the vaccine will work, at least at first, in directly blocking the virus from entering. There's other ways that it will teach your body to continue to produce antibodies that will break that association. And again, we go into a lot of details in this, but the basic idea, and Dr. Brunings has talked about this before, and it's been pretty amazing, is that when a virus enters your cell, it will make 30,000, 50,000 copies of itself, and it will kill the cell that it infects. So this is why people have problems with breathing and other issues with SARS-CoV-2 or with COVID-19, is that the cells that are infected in the lungs that are extremely rich in that receptor, that ACE2 receptor, that means that those cells are very vulnerable. And that's why people have respiratory issues, because once infected, that cell will die. And so that is the reason for the problem. So we'll go into how this new vaccine was developed. And this is really important. We talked about this idea of being able to block that association between the virus and you. You know, what's the shield that the guard puts up? And this new technology that we talk about, this RNA-based vaccine, RNA-based vaccines, the reason that they're so good is because you don't have to go through the old process of shooting viruses into eggs or cell culture and culturing viruses, which takes time, specialized equipment. You have to retool to do it. Making RNA is so simple. We do it in the laboratory very simply. So when you're a company that wants to scale up and produce RNA, we'll talk about what that is in a minute. It's easy to do. It's an easy molecule to make. And just to give you an idea, the Moderna vaccine was developed in 2 days after they had the information, the genetic information of the virus, and it was in human trials in 42 days. So this is extremely rapid and certainly unprecedented, and it's allowed to be happening because the technology of mRNA vaccines. So what's an mRNA vaccine? We need to go back to high school biology, and I'll give you some good analogies here to help you understand what this is. So if we talk about what's called the central dogma of molecular biology, it says that there's DNA, right? This is your master blueprint. All the cells in your body have it, and they dictate everything about you. This is your blueprint. But that blueprint is safely tucked away in the cell. It's the information is locked in essentially a library in the nucleus of the cell, and that's where it belongs. Safe, put away. But what happens is the information in DNA gets what's called transcribed, or gets put into a temporary form called RNA. And RNA leaves the nucleus of the cell, leaves that central library or repository, and ventures into the rest of the cell. There it encounters a part of the cell called a ribosome. It's not important so much what it's called, but it's that information then is taken and turned into a protein, which are molecules that are the molecules that make the structures and the functional parts of our cells, the enzymes, the structural components of cells. So to clarify what this is, think of it like this. DNA is like the hard drive of your computer. You never see it. It's put away. It's all the information that it needs to make things run. But little bits of information that you may need for a certain application can be moved on a temporary type of device like a USB drive. The USB drive is the RNA, okay? That's the temporary form of the information from the master source. That's the USB drive. So RNA is like a USB drive, temporary information storage. The ribosome, well, that's like the printer that makes the final output. The printer is the ribosome. The protein is the output of that printer. So the information that came from the hard drive moved on that temporary form to another place where information came out, where the final product came out. How this applies to, the good news about this is that like USB drives that end up in my lint trap every week, they're temporary storage forms, right? We break them, we lose them, we erase them, whatever. So this is the beauty of RNA vaccines. You would be injected with RNA, which is a temporary molecule. You inject it, it has a half-life, it goes away quick. But yet that RNA is now going to teach the body to produce a snapshot of what the enemy looks like, of what the spike protein looks like. So your body is ready if the spike protein comes along. It's like a wanted poster, basically. Your body produces a wanted poster that says, we're ready if that invader comes. So how does that work? This is the beauty part about the RNA vaccines. You are injected with RNA, which is this molecule and that RNA molecule encodes the spike protein, has the genetic information only for the spike protein, no other viral parts. And then your body makes the protein. You are turned into the vaccine manufacturing plant. Your body makes the spike protein. Then now your body learns that the spike protein is the thing it needs to fight. This way, when the SARS-CoV-2 virus, if it comes along, your body is ready to attack it. That's why the vaccine works. And this is really kind of old technology. People say, well, this is all new. It's too new. It's a problem. This is old stuff. People have been injecting RNA into animals since 1989. They would inject the luciferase, or the gene that makes fireflies glow green. You could inject that RNA into the stomach of a rat or a mouse and then watch that area glow, because it would produce the same thing a firefly does. The woman who's in this picture, Dr. Catalin Carrico, was instrumental in figuring out how to help the body not see the RNA as foreign. And we don't go into the details of this, but that was 2005. That was the big breakthrough. So here we are in 2021. This is 16 years old now that she was able to figure this out. So when people say that this is too new, it's, crazy, we've done it too fast, this is technology that is extremely mature and people have been working on for a long time. She's actually now the vice president of Biotech, which is one of the companies that's working on the RNA vaccine, or has produced the RNA vaccine with Pfizer. So how this works is basically, this picture just says, here is the lipid nanoparticle containing mRNA. So just to go take a step back, how do you, when you get the injection, how does that little message, that RNA, that information for the spike protein, how does that get into your cell? Well, the companies have put this into something called a lipid nanoparticle, or LNP. And all that is a little globule of fat, little bubble of fat that the RNA travels within. That when this is injected into your deltoid muscle, this will fuse with your cell and allow the RNA to come in. And this is nothing new either. This is very well established technology and really exciting things happening with this in the area of targeting cancer. We can talk about that another time. But the basic idea is that this little bubble of fat contains the RNA information that goes into your cell that teaches your cells to produce the protein and then bring on the immune response. That's how this works. It's very simple, and that's why it's so useful. It's great because you're not being subjected to a dead or attenuated virus. And this is how all the other ones, well, most of the other ones were produced. You would be injected with a weakened version of a virus, which would give many different proteins that the body would respond to. It's easy for companies to do this fast. It's easy to change if mutations come along. It's very easy to produce and very inexpensive to produce. So this is what's really exciting about this kind of technology. The disadvantage, as you've heard, is that the vaccines are unstable. RNA is a notoriously unstable molecule. I've made a career working with it, but it's always a challenge. You have to be real clean, no dust, no dirt, no nothing. You can't touch anything. Everything's got to be frozen and cold. Asha's smiling because she's lived this with me. And so this is kind of the disadvantage of the technology. The other disadvantage is that the long-term issues with this are not known yet, but so far everything looks really good, and there's no reason to anticipate that there would be any long-term issues. It's your body makes RNA all the time. You're subjected to RNA all the time from bacteria and viruses and fungi that come from our environment and that live within us. It's no big deal. So the big deal here was a poorly named program called Warp Speed, which gave the idea that this would be a kind of hazardous and rapid process that maybe would eliminate some of our safety barriers. And really what this was this is just a public-private partnership that allowed the normal regulatory steps to occur, but they would happen at overlapping. So instead of one following the other, which might take 20 years or 10 years to bring up a new vaccine, they were all done at the same time. And there are companies that were working 24 hours a day with a kind of vaccine that was very easy to produce. So that's why this went so fast. And, hats off to the US regulators that allowed this to happen. The US investment of $10 billion went to a series of companies to help facilitate this very expensive process. And they funded different ways to do it. So we saw Pfizer and Moderna's mRNA vaccines come out first because that's the easiest and fastest one to do. Other ones are still coming, the AstraZeneca one, Johnson & Johnson, but those take a little longer to manufacture and get into the pipeline. So that's why there's been different rates here. The public's concern was that it's too fast, not enough oversight. it was the same regulatory process that these always go through, just overlapping steps instead of sequential steps. And that's why it went so fast. I mentioned before that this is not new technology. Others have said there's been a lot of disinformation online that says this has not ever been done before. It's actually the companies that are involved have been looking at mRNA vaccines since 2013 for Zika, Ebola, a disease called chikungunya that's mosquito transmitted, HIV, rabies, influenza, cytomegalovirus. There's a whole bunch of them that are being tested since 2013. The reason they're not regulated is because of that long, drawn out, expensive regulatory process. So the COVID-19 pandemic has just ignited the ability of them to do this more quickly. There other disinformation I've read said this has never been approved before. Actually, an mRNA vaccine was approved in 2018 called Onpattro, which is for a rare hereditary peripheral nerve disease. So this has been approved and is technology that's well established. And when you look at the pipelines, this is, I've mentioned some of these before. This is for, I think, for Moderna, but they're well into many different mRNA treatments or vaccines or treatments. There's some of these are targeting cancers, different cancers too. So there's a lot of really good things happening in the mRNA area. And you can look at any of these company websites and see the progress in different diseases that they're working towards. So this is nothing novel. Other company called Carevac, they've got a great pipeline going. And this little graph on the right shows who's doing this. And there are companies that are working on this worldwide. This is a worldwide technology that is really exciting, and I think is a real game changer. So we're heading into really just how do we know it's safe and has efficacy. And before I hand off to Dr. Brunings, everything I mentioned before happened at the same time. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Is it safe? Does it work? These are the questions that phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials take. And these can take years and very expensive and very hard to recruit for them. Here for SARS-CoV-2, it was easy to recruit. Everybody wanted to get into the trials, lots of volunteers. I would have done it in a heartbeat. I did actually, just never got the call because I don't get exposed enough. But these are things that were done all at the same time rather than sequentially. So the same exact trial, and I can't emphasize that enough. It went through the process. So with that, I'll hand off to Dr. Brunings. She'll talk briefly about the how do we know that it's safe and that it works well.
Kevin, can I interrupt?
Go ahead and run with that.
Kevin, can I interrupt here for just a second?
Sure.
Do you have a rooster in your house? Is that what I'm hearing there?
I have a rooster sitting right outside my window,
okay.
and
all right.
Yeah, I would love it if he were to go somewhere else, but yeah, that's coming from my side.
Okay, all right. I just want everybody to know we don't have one in the studio here.
No, we're all good.
All right, Dr. Brunings.
Yes, of course. It's funny because I have a rooster about two yards down. So, so I guess I need to talk to you a little bit about how safe and how good the vaccine is. And so normally when vaccines are tested, it takes, like Kevin said, it takes a long time to get enough volunteers. So normally vaccines are approved after being tested in about 3,000 or so volunteers. And in this case, the trials were done on more than 73,000 people, right? So they have more than 20 times as much. So if there are any negative effects that were severe, we would have seen them, and we didn't. Most of the effects that we saw, negative effects, were pretty mild, some swelling and some redness at the side, some pain, maybe a bit of a headache and feeling tired for the rest of the day. Extremely mild compared to contracting COVID-19, where even the simplest case takes you out of the running for 2 weeks. So the trial isn't done yet. The scientists are going to follow the patients that were injected for 2 years afterward to check for any rare event that might occur over such an extended period of time. So we also, what they did is they immunized, so they had all these people in the trial, and they didn't know who was getting the vaccine and who not. And so they decided that they were going to stop the trial after, among those people, a certain number of people had gotten COVID-19. And in this case, decided it had to be at least 150. So when they blew through that, like within a couple of weeks, they were past that number. And then when they opened that up and saw, okay, so many people got COVID-19, how many of them were immunized? It was shown that more than 90% of these people who got the disease had not been immunized. And the people who were immunized were much less likely to catch the disease, and they had a 0% likelihood of getting severe disease. So we show not only is the vaccine very effective against contracting the disease at all, it is 100% effective against getting very ill. Next slide, Kevin. Okay, and so the overall data, you don't have to worry about the numbers in the graph, but if that's something you're interested in, you can blow that up and stare at this later. But the overall data indicated that the vaccine was 95% effective, and this is both for Pfizer and Moderna. The exact percentages are slightly different, but this is basically it. And the thing is that before we knew these numbers, the scientific community would have accepted any vaccine with a greater than 50% effectiveness. So now that the vaccination is more than 95% effective, we're spoiled. Like, we're balking at other vaccines that come down the pipeline with like 78% effective. If this had been the only vaccine available, we would have done the happy dance, right? So 95% is incredible. Okay.
Well, can I just mention real quick that the other thing that this shows is the demographics that were tested, that it was tested on a broad scope of people of different ethnicities, males and females, different age groups. And it was really important that those tests were done. And had significant enrollments that were matching the nation demographically, which that's really important. There also were women who were pregnant in this trial or who became pregnant during the trial. And
so
also
they became pregnant. I think at the time, if you were pregnant at the time, you weren't eligible to enter in the trial. But some women got pregnant after they got the vaccine, and they were fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I just thought that was important to add. Go ahead from there.
It does. The other thing I wanted to point out is that people younger than 16 were not included in the trial. So the research is ongoing, but for now the vaccines are only approved for those 16 years and older. We have no evidence that it's going to be bad for the younger ones. We don't have the data yet. Okay. This graph is something that you can look at and sort of make sense. So what you can see is that we look at the number of cases of COVID-19 over time. And the red line shows the number of cases of people that were immunized. And then the blue line shows the number of cases of COVID-19 in people that were not immunized. And you can see after about 10 days or so after the first dose, you can see those two lines split up. And you can see that the people that were not immunized continue to, at a continuous rate, continue to get disease, whereas the people that were immunized, that line basically flattens off. So very little disease. And on the long run, very little side effects as well. Okay. The most common side effects was pain at the injection site. And there was no difference in that after the second dose. Kevin? Okay. Most of the side effects that we saw were fatigue and headache. Those were actually less in the second dose. Let's see, there were some serious adverse effects. So we don't know that those were effects of the vaccine. So there were people that had some serious things happen to them, but they were happening at the same rate in the non-immunized people. So we had the same number of people getting serious effects in the vaccine and in the people that did not get the vaccine. So that would argue that it probably was not caused by the vaccine, but it's definitely something we need to keep our eye on. Okay. think I just said that.
Yeah, that's a really important
yes,
point to
it
underscore, because stuff happens, and it's too convenient to start to make the
Correct.
mistake that the vaccine caused it to happen. I think we talked
Right.
about earlier, if you got vaccinated and hit by lightning, some people would say, see, you caused it. You made you more likely to be hit by lightning. As humans, we make those associations, but there were no serious side effects that happened in any level higher than the non-vaccinated group.
And Kevin, I'm reading
other
am,
point-
am I reading that right? Can you go back? So you had
Yeah.
6 people actually died that were in the study. 4 of them
You're right.
got the placebo, and 2 of them got the
Right.
vaccine. Okay.
Well, you're going to get this because you're doing a study on more than 73,000 people.
Sure.
Life is going to continue to
Right,
happen,
right.
right? These people probably would have died even if they weren't in the vaccine.
Right,
so
right.
you get this because you're working with a large number of people.
Right.
Somebody got murdered in the trial,
sure.
and that was unrelated to the vaccine. But all those instances and deaths are sort of written down and noted.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to go ahead here. Okay.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, this was just the data that came out from the Moderna trial, which really said the same thing, that if you took you vaccinated some people, you didn't vaccinate other people, you let them all go, or you gave one a placebo, one the actual mRNA vaccine, you let them go out and live their lives, and then when you got to a certain number of COVID cases, said how many of those people were vaccinated. And it turns out that the vast majority of them were not. They received the placebo. So the mRNA vaccine showed from either from Moderna or from Pfizer to be very effective. The few cases that did happen were likely because someone contracted the virus before the vaccine really kicked in, because it takes a few days before you really start to mount that immune response. And really, it's the 2 doses that make the biggest effect. So the first dose, it gets you to about 50%. The second dose gets you to about 90%. So it's really the second dose that's most important. So if you contract COVID during that first 28 days or 21 days with Pfizer vaccine, you are less likely to contract a severe form of COVID-19, but it can happen. So that's likely what they were seeing.
So on that note, Kevin, why
Sure.
There's 2 injections on the Pfizer, but I think Moderna is just 1 injection?
Now, Pfizer's
No,
2.
they're both 2.
They're both
Yeah,
2?
the AstraZeneca is likely to be 1.
Okay.
They've talked about that in England, about how they would is it make more sense to give everybody 1 injection versus having half the people get 2.
Oh, okay.
And really, everything they know about the immune response to this at this point, and what the FDA has approved, is 2 doses.
Okay.
And so it's really critical
Correct.
for folks who are able to get this, to get the first dose, and make sure you get an appointment for that second one, because
Right.
the full immune response is only conferred after that second injection.
So let me follow that up with, so 1 dose gets you to 50, 2 doses get you to 95. If someone got 3 or 4 doses, that's not going to affect anything. I mean, that's just going to be replicating.
Right. It's not going to greatly increase the 95 and bring it to 96 or 97. And for our purposes, for our discussion, the difference between 95 and 96 is pretty negligible.
Right.
One point I do want to make, actually, is that for those that are concerned about potential side effects, the numbers don't lie. This is a very, very safe vaccine. Now, the numbers also don't lie about COVID-19. COVID-19 is not safe. We are now, I just looked it up in Polk County, as of this morning, 826 people died in Polk County. That is 2 people out of every 3,000, or 1.5 person per 1,000 people. That is a much, much greater risk of dying of COVID-19 than you have of even getting a sore arm from the vaccine.
Right.
So, just based on that, you ought to be standing in line for the vaccine.
Right.
Do you want to address this new variant question?
Yes. So lately in the news, there's been a lot of rumbling about the new variants of the virus that was recently identified. So the one thing I want you to know is that viruses are constantly changing. Every single person who contracts the disease sneezes and coughs out viruses that are different than the virus they were initially infected with. This is a normal part of the biology of viruses. Now, in the United Kingdom, they do a really good job of sort of looking at exactly what the viruses in their population look like. And they noticed that there was a certain variant, a slightly different version of the virus that became a lot more common than the original versions. And so the researchers suggested that maybe this variant spreads more easily. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that this was actually originated in the UK. It's just that the UK was looking for this kind of stuff to happen, and therefore they noticed it. Now, this is cause and effect. You don't know, do we see more numbers because it spreads easily, or does the virus just spread more easily in general, and therefore we see these numbers? So you don't exactly know what is the cause and what is the effect. The point is that in the United States so far, we have seen 52 total cases as of this morning of this new variant that was identified, of which 22 actually in Florida and 26 in California. But here's the thing that's important. Like, how does this change our behavior? If a virus spreads more readily, how does that change your behavior? And the answer is it doesn't, right? You still need to do the exact same thing. You still need to wear your mask. You still need to keep your distance. And vaccination is still going to protect us against this virus. So to a large extent, it ought not to matter for us. If anything, it needs to make us more concerned about following our safety protocols. Okay.
Yes, I'll pick up there. So the other big question then is to really learn, how long does this vaccine work? And they're also going to unblind the placebo group. So the people who receive the placebo and are not protected, they will be offered the vaccine, which is great. And then the question is, how do you get this to everybody? And that's really the conundrum we're in now. We're in a logistical problem. How do you get millions of doses into millions of arms? And that's not an easy task. So that's really where we're at right now. But the big trick and the reason we're here is to remove that first barrier, the willingness to receive it. And that's something that we all need to be working on towards widespread compliance in public health. And the way that you create that change is by values-based communication. And as someone who teaches strategic communication to different groups, just giving people more information and saying, look at this chart I learned about on Facebook, it ain't going to work. You have to start talking to people about how this protects the most vulnerable, how it protects the immunocompromised, how we have a healthcare system that is extremely expensive to keep running, and we're packing it full of people where we could have a preventable disease. We're putting healthcare workers in the line of peril, doctors and nurses who now face the risk of becoming infected themselves. The other big issue is that, as Dr. Brunings said, the virus, as long as it's in people, is changing. And the more people that are harboring this virus, the more you're going to have mutation frequency. And the more aggressive the virus may get, it may have other complications. It's great for us to limit that. The other big one is the economy. And many people say, well, the economy is doing great. Look at the stock market. That's a number. It's a measure of several companies, and particularly big companies. In our town, my town, a lot of small companies are going out of business. Small businesses, mom and pop businesses have closed, a lot of smaller ones. Nothing's coming back completely until we curb this pandemic. And so I think it's really important for us, for protecting the vulnerable, protecting economic interests, for us to get back to normal as fast as we can. And the vaccine is safe, it works, and it's here. And so that we have to be ready to get in line to do that. Where do we share that kind of persuasion? And most of the bad information is in social media. So put the good information there. Invite people to watch this presentation. Invite them to ask questions. Use your networks to share the good information about this, about how in order for us to get back to a normal economy and normal lives, normal distance, putting away the mask, all that's going to happen as soon as we can get back to normal. So share that good news. And you can see lots of it on Twitter. Healthcare workers using the hashtag got the shot. Some really interesting things that people have said. You know, I don't get jealous of other people. You know, you get a new car, you get a new house, or, you know, go out to dinner somewhere. I just say good on you. But I am deeply, deeply jealous of people who have been getting this shot. I can't wait to get mine because I want to be protected, and I want to protect my family. And that's where I need to be. I have to be able to, you know, care for an elderly father and other folks without worrying about getting them sick. And so I will have more freedom to operate as soon as I get that vaccine and have my resistance to that disease. So with that, I'll say thank you. I do this podcast every week called the Talking Biotech Podcast, where we do a deep dive into areas of DNA science and how it works in medicine and agriculture. Dr. Brunings also is she's Asha Brunings at gmail.com. And we're both very happy to answer your questions via email. So please reach out if we can be of service. So we'll end there and be happy to take any questions.
And Kevin, I'll add to that. The podcast is where I first heard some of your explanations about this, and I thought they were excellent, and it made me feel very comfortable with the vaccine. But I want to put some of what you said in Polk County terms to make sure I understand it. And one thing that stood out in your presentation was previous vaccines may have used the actual virus, and they had to replicate it, and then they had to kind of weaken it, and then they gave it to you and hope that it didn't get stronger or whatever. This is in no way even similar to that, so you don't have to worry about that. I would assume the labs that manufacture this, you know, when you see some of these virus movies on TV, the labs look like, you know, everybody wears a spacesuit and all that. I mean, this material would almost, I wouldn't say it's safe to handle, but I would think it is fairly safe for the people who are dealing with it, right?
Yes, this is very safe to handle. There's no actual virus necessary to make this because we're making genetic material and it's just made by a machine. You don't actually need the virus around.
Yeah, and you're just basically faking your body out. You're just saying you really don't have this, but you think you have this, so you better build these antibodies up and fight it like it really is here. And so that leads to my next question. Nobody seems to know, is this shot going to be a 1 year, a 5 year, a lifetime? Is there any way to look at that and what you know of it and determine that?
So yes, based on what we know, we do not think that you will need to get this vaccine multiple times, that after you have gotten your 2 shots, you should be done. This is not like the influenza vaccine, like the flu shot. The flu virus is a different virus, and it changes a lot more quick. It changes a lot faster than SARS-CoV-2 does. And therefore, the influenza vaccine, we do need to change it every year because it changes so fast. But the SARS-CoV-2 virus doesn't change so fast at all. And so I don't expect this to be necessary every year or every 2 years.
And one aspect of this that I haven't heard talked about too much, but it dawned on me is, so I think I read this morning about 300,000 people in Florida have been vaccinated. That doesn't mean they're safe at this point. It's going to take a little time to kick in. But in 2 or 3 weeks, when you have these numbers up over 500,000 and 1 million, those people are safe, but are those people still going to be spreaders? Could they potentially get the virus temporarily and then spread it to somebody who hasn't been vaccinated?
Yes, the fact of the matter is we don't have the detailed numbers on that yet. And therefore, we have to assume that they can spread, right? We have to be on the safe side. So it is possible that people who are immunized are protecting themselves, but not necessarily protecting those around them. And sadly, if that's the case, the only way we're going to nip this in the bud is if everybody gets immunized.
So
Right.
if they could spread it, we won't see a big down spike in the infection rate. But if it stops with them, we would probably see the infection rate start winding down.
Correct.
Pretty quickly.
Right.
Okay.
Right, because then if they can't spread it, then the virus has less bodies to make more copies of themselves,
Right.
and you have less virus to go around. So that would be preferable, but we got to take whatever immunity we have.
Right, right. The other question I have is, it seems like this is only attacks the lungs. I mean, what's killing people is they wind up on a ventilator and they just can't even breathe anymore, and they more or less suffocate from the virus. Why? Is it the virus replicating that causes the suffocation, or is it, I've heard that it's the body's reaction to the virus that causes the problem, but yet we're talking about the body reacting to the mRNA as being the solution.
Right.
It's a little confusing.
So it's a little more involved than that, and I don't want to go too deeply into this. I'm not a medical doctor, but I will tell you what I know about this. I got this from a physician who works in New York, who posts this, explains this, and he says there's actually really 4 phases to the virus. Initially, you can have the virus, but you don't have any disease. And then you become sick, and then you have a real viral disease. So you have the lung damage, the coughing, the fever. But after that, so after the first week, during the second and the third week, what you can get is your body becomes, it has what we call an inflammatory response. So it's sort of an inflammation, kind of like normally when you have inflammation from a wound, but now over your entire body through all your blood vessels. And that can cause blood clotting. It can cause low blood pressure. And so that can cause all sorts of other problems. And that is really our body our immune system going haywire. In response to the virus. And that seems to be more the case in the later stages of the disease. So not so much early on.
So we're talking about healthy people getting the vaccine. What about people who aren't healthy? What if they have a compromised immune system? What if they have AIDS? What if they have some disease that where does the vaccine stand with them?
Right. So that depends on what kind of disease you have, and that's the discussion you need to have with your doctor, because your doctor will be able to tell you this particular disease puts you at higher risk. If you don't have a good immune response, then you will not have a good immune response against the vaccine. And it depends on what kind of. There are different immune diseases and different immune deficiencies, and some of them will have no problem with this and others do. So that is, if you are in that category, you probably should talk to your doctor.
Right. One of the questions that was sent in, are there other spike molecules that are beneficial, or are they all harmful?
Well, that's a decoration on all coronaviruses, in which there are many different coronaviruses. Many of them, some which contribute to what we think of as common cold. But they're all a little bit different. And so the SARS-CoV-2 is recognized as different because of the differences genetically. There's nothing that's been beneficial that has been described as beneficial in a spike protein. These are all features of a virus.
Okay. When I see people getting the injection, the needle looks extraordinarily long. It's like they're trying to drive this thing almost to your bone or something. I mean, you've probably seen that, right? I mean, I've gotten shots where the needle's only that long. This thing seems to be that long. Is there a reason for that? Did they have to get deeper into your tissue or something?
Oops, Asha, you're muted.
Yeah,
I could take a guess on this one too, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, they have to get into your muscle, basically. And so the shorter needles are made usually for subcutaneous. They go like right underneath the skin. But this needs to go in the muscle. It needs to go through the skin and into the muscle. So I suspect that's why it's a little longer.
Yeah. And the other thing about the needle too is that when you push fluid through a needle, you create shearing forces. And just, think of it as little vortices and little things that happen as that passes through. If you don't want to disrupt your nanoparticles, so you're in the little bubbles that contain this important molecule, they probably have to flow really easily. So having them out of a larger needle that's slightly larger bore size is likely why those needles appear to be so imposing.
And this is probably a stupid question, but it seems to me that if you inject it into your bloodstream, it would get through your body much quicker. mRNA doesn't work that way?
So you don't need to get it through your body, actually. What you get is you get a localized inflammation.
Okay.
And then you have in the muscle, there are cells from your immune system that are going to go in and gobble up that RNA. Or the other thing that can happen is the RNA is taken up by the muscle cells. The muscle cells are going to start making the protein and they're probably going to die. And again, those immune cells will go in and they will gobble up those cells and clean them up, and they will activate the immune response. So we don't need the RNA to go circling throughout the body. They just need to be in that local area. And then the immune cells, they're called phagocytes, are going to go in, gobble those up, and they're going to go to a nearby lymph node, like right underneath under your arm.
Right.
That's the draining lymph node for your arm, and that's where they're going to make start that activate that immune response that's going to happen. So you don't want it in your bloodstream, you want it in the muscles.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something I never thought about. I mean, I just assumed things like this needed to go through your whole body, activate throughout your whole body to be able to fight it.
No, it only needs to activate in one lymph node, and then the lymph node will take care of the rest of the body.
So, Kevin, something you said on your podcast the other day was interesting to me. Because this virus lives in other creatures, bats, or I don't know what other creatures it'll live in, it's never going to be eradicated. It's always going to be here with us. That's one reason the vaccine is going to be critically important, because maybe this pandemic goes away this year, but if you don't have the vaccine 5 years from now, you're still vulnerable to get this and get really sick and die from it.
No, that's exactly right. That these viruses come from natural repositories where they're constantly changing and mutating. And there are people who study what's going on in caves and in bats who are great vectors for this. An animal called a pangolin gets a very similar coronavirus. MERS came through a camel, through a dromedary. So there are animal vectors that when humans either butcher or in other ways come in contact with those animals, which we do more and more as we're infringing on natural areas in certain parts of the world, these are going to become more frequent. That's why having a very rapid and adaptable system like mRNA is a great way to be able to confront them. So this is an excellent confluence of technology that will only be more relevant in limiting pandemics going forward.
Well, I mean, this is fascinating to me. I don't know if the rest of the audience is fascinated, but I am. I'm glad you guys came on. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from your podcast. I really enjoy listening to it. Like I told you before, it's turned me on to some other biotech podcasts because I'm really into technology. Anything that can make my life easier or simpler, I like that. But yours has turned me on to all kind of new ideas and thinking about things I never thought about before, especially with health. And I want to go to one other thing regarding our health. So besides the vaccine, we're talking about vitamin D, zinc, some other things that can help out. And like you and I talked about before we came on the air, even if Florida gets 1 million vials of this every week, we're still looking at 6 months before everybody gets the shot. So this is not going to be solved in January or February. This is going to be in the summer, maybe, before we get to where we want to be on this thing. Given that, is there any evidence that zinc works or vitamin D works, or are these just kind of anecdotal science things that are coming from the zinc maker and the vitamin D maker?
So no, actually, I looked that up this morning. Didn't look up the zinc, but I did look up the vitamin D. So there is a paper was published this year that showed that vitamin D replacement helps older adults to make good antibodies.
Okay.
Now, vitamin D is a vitamin that is naturally made in your skin when you're exposed to sunlight. right?
Okay.
So I imagine those poor souls living near the North Pole right now, not getting a whole lot of sun, right? In Florida, we're probably not at risk, I don't think. I mean, you know, we're outside
Right.
here all the time. Having said that, taking a multivitamin in the morning with vitamin D isn't going to kill you, right? The
Right.
worst thing it's going to do is make you some expensive urine.
Yeah.
But but you know, you can make, but it doesn't seem to necessarily make a difference in the younger adults. Like
Right.
we know it helps in those 65 and older. It seems to be particularly helpful. So that's what I can see about vitamin D.
So that brings up my next question.
Well, let me jump in on that
Oh, yeah,
real quick. Is that the other side of that is that there is some data showing that that patients with COVID-19 do show vitamin D deficiency at a higher rate than normal. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that vitamin D allows you to be infected or have COVID. What it says is that you may get sick and your vitamin D level goes down. But
Right.
like as Asha says, it wouldn't hurt. Same with zinc. It doesn't hurt. The best non-pharmacological, best interventions are non-pharmacological. Keep your distance, wear the mask if you go outside like you are infected.
Right.
And just to protect others. And if everybody does that stuff, we're probably going to make a lot of progress. They've controlled it in places like Taiwan and throughout Southeast Asia just by behavioral adjustment.
Right.
So it can be done.
Yeah, and I always tell people, you know, regardless of the mask or all the other things you do, if you're in a room and you have it, and I'm in the room with you, I may get it. But if we're not in the same room together, I definitely won't get it. So if there's one thing you can do, it's stay away from other people. And
But you know, it's hard though.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
hard.
I know.
I mean, we're social people and we want to be together, and walking around with the mask is awful, right? I mean, it's hard to breathe, and you know, and I know doctors wear them all the time, but there's a reason I didn't become a doctor, right?
Right.
So I mean, I get that it's awful, but you know, we gotta stick with it.
Right.
People are dying, and it's real.
Right. Yeah. And the numbers are scary when you look at it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing up around Gainesville, but down here, probably up until October, I knew very few people that had been infected and only a couple of people who had died. And since 1st of December, around Thanksgiving, the pace has accelerated like crazy. The numbers aren't that much different than they were, say, back in July, but the number of people I know, the number of people who have gotten very, very sick, I know here in Polk County, back in October, we were about 50 people on any given day in the hospital with a COVID-related symptom. Right now, we're over 300. And that number's been going up every day.
I checked this morning, there were 622 new cases reported this morning and 7 new deaths in Polk County.
Right, and so
just today.
Just with the New Year's holiday and all that, and all the social interaction, you know, I would expect this thing to continue spiking up for a while, for the next few days, and then hopefully it'll start going down. I mean, it seems to take a rhythm up and down. And I think viruses have always done that, but I would expect these numbers to keep rising, certainly for the next few days, just from the social interaction of New Year's, families getting together, and that's the last thing I'll say. The last thing I heard was it seems like families are spreading it as much as anything. It's not, you know, going out to Walmart. You're not getting it at Walmart. You're getting it at home from, you know, Uncle Larry or whatever. And it seems to be spreading more that way. But regardless, we know what we need to do to prevent it. We know what we need to do to stay safe. And we'll end this. I really appreciate you guys coming on. I think the people of Polk County appreciate it. I think, I'm sure a lot of people got a lot out of it, a lot more understanding of it. It's not simple, but it's very reassuring to know that people like you, who know this thing inside and out, are anxious to get the vaccine. You know, it makes me more anxious to get the vaccine because while I feel like I think a lot of people feel, oh, my body can handle it, every once in a while I see somebody who I thought they would have been able to handle it and get really, really sick. And you know, they're runners, they exercise, they eat right, they do all these things right, and yet they get it and it kills them. And this thing is very random that way, and we just don't know what it's going to do until we get it. And the best way to not find out is to not get it, right? So,
Right.
But anyway.
I always tell my students this: the best disease is the one you never got.
Yeah, exactly. But once again, I want to thank you guys for doing this. I appreciate your time. The people of Polk County appreciate your time. And if we have some more questions, you gave us the email. We'll make this available through our county. I don't know if it'll be on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, but we're going to get it out to as many people as we can. And so with that, we'll sign off. And again, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Commissioner Braswell. We'll see you later.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.